welcome to London Live Debate with Reya El-Salahi. This is the show that takes a deeper look at the stories making headlines in the capital and the issues at the heart of life in the city. The question up for debate this evening: should children be free to dress how they like in school? A report released by the Church of England this week calls for boys as young as 5 to be able to wear tutus and high heels, and girls to wear tool belts and superhero capes in the classroom without criticism. The anti-bullying guidance aims to tackle homophobic and transphobic bullying in the 262 Church of England-run schools across London. So, is it right to let boys and girls explore their gender identity and wear whatever they want in schools? Joining me to share their thoughts on this, a panel of straight-talking, opinionated Londoners. First up, it's Mark Foley, a teacher specialising in history and politics at a Church of England secondary school, and the businesswoman, mentor and founder of public relations firm Ariatu PR, Ronke Lawal. Welcome to London Live Debate to you both.
Thank you.
Right, let's kick things off. Mark, you're a teacher. Do you agree with the Church of England guidance?
To an extent, yes. On the one hand, I'd never disagree that we should have anti-bullying policies in school. I don't think any child should maybe to feel any different for how they act or how they behave in school. But I think the Church of England is slightly conflating the issue here. Because I think if you're going to be transgender, by those issuing that specific guidance for transgender students, then that's assuming that somebody can change their gender. And I think by saying that they can change their gender, I don't think the Church of England has the expertise in order to offer that guidance.
Interesting. OK, Ronke, your thoughts when you first heard this?
I'm not quite sure that's entirely what they're stating in that issue by issuing that statement. I think what it's about is allowing kids to just be kids, allowing kids to explore and just be. And I feel like the fact that the Church of England is issuing this kind of statement is actually really empowering. Too often young people are restricted, and they're restricted by religiosity, by social construct, and I feel like this is really refreshing. I think it's something that more religions and more churches or religious institutes should actually uphold, because what does it mean to allow a young boy to play or dress in a tutu, or a young girl to dress up as a builder? What does that mean? What's the actual meaning? It's allowing people to be free, and it actually means compassion. If you look at the core of what the Church of England is doing, saying in that statement, it's about being compassionate to your fellow man, and I think that's really important, or woman. It's really important.
Yeah, I think it is really important, but the Church of England, when they released this guidance, they're automatically saying that everyone has to be equal in society, which I fully agree with. Yeah. Absolutely, I'm not to disagree with that for a second. But then when you look at Church of England guidance when it comes to who can marry in a church, they don't say everybody is equal. When it comes to transgender people and whether they can marry in church, then they also issue guidance that it depends on the vicar. So a vicar can refuse to marry a male to female or female to male transgendered person, even if they're going to marry someone of the opposite sex. Now, the church has to allow that marriage to take place, but the vicar doesn't. So I think, in a sense, that's sending out a bit of a mixed signal. Because in the one sense, the Church of England is saying, yes, you can be whatever gender you want to be, because it's transphobic guidance. This is not allowing children who they want to be. But then, on the other hand, it's giving them a false sense of hope, because if they grow up to be Anglican, members of the Anglican community, then they're not going to be allowed to get married in that church. So, in a sense, it's excluding them, but giving them false hope.
Is it really giving them a false hope? I feel like we have to be really careful, and I feel, we're thinking about there's so many changes in legislation. We saw in Australia, gay marriage is now legal, which is, I think, again, it comes down to this is life, this is the world, the future. Controlling what people wear or how they choose to identify as is actually really restrictive, and I think it's not giving them a sense of false hope. I think it's giving children hope that they can be who they want to be, and that's really what, if we look at any religion, at the core, I'm going to go back to what religion should be. It's about love, it's about compassion, it's about freedom, it's about no judgment. And we shouldn't be judging young children if they choose to, as you said earlier in your introduction, Reya, dress up in a tutu or dress up as builders or whatever, actually. All of these kind of gender constructs are meaningless.
I don't think gender constructs are meaningless whatsoever. I think
in dress sense they are.
Perhaps in dress sense. In dress sense. And under no circumstances would I ask a boy to stop playing with a doll, or under no circumstances would I ask a girl to stop playing with an action man.
Right.
Let's say, for argument's sake.
Right.
But I just do think there's a certain agenda at the moment that tends to cater to people who say if you disagree that gender is a biological as opposed to a social construct, automatically you're transphobic. Now that does exist in society, a little bit more in North America than it does in Europe, but it definitely exists, and you can see it seeping in a little bit here.
But that's not what they're saying in this. They're not saying you cannot have an opinion. You can have your opinion, and you can have, you know, every family is going to be different. Every young child's family is going to be different. But what the church is saying through this is actually allow children or individuals to be in environments where they are not faced with that judgment, a judgment that allows for bullying, and a judgment that allows for hatred. There's so much hatred that comes from, you know, picking and choosing how people look and dress, and it really, there's other deeper issues, but I feel like the statement is such a basic, just let people be, like, let children be children, let them play, let them, it's not about, I think you're going very deeply into, you know, sexuality, and, you know, really, you're going quite deep, actually. And they're not saying they want to change.
This is transphobic anti-bullying guidance.
Right,
yeah? So I'm not going deeply into whether you want to change gender or not. I believe the Church of England have set that status for themselves by issuing transphobic anti-bullying guidance. So this does delve into the issue of, can children change gender? Now, if it just let me finish this point, please. Now, so if a 2-year-old or 3-year-old child comes and says that I'm not a boy, I want to be a girl, there is a large body of medical evidence now, not medical evidence, but medical practice, that they will facilitate that change and advise the parents to proceed with gender reassignment for that child. And I think what the Church of England are doing, to a certain extent, is buying into that agenda.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Mark, do you think it would be different were this guidance being issued to a 16-year-old instead of a 6-year-old pupil? Is the age the issue for you?
No, absolutely. I think they're correct. I think boys should be allowed to play with tiaras. I think girls should be allowed to play with trucks. I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. But I think because somebody does certain actions that society doesn't deem to be typical male or typical female, then society automatically assumes, or society is starting to assume, that that person is in the wrong gender. But what I think maybe is like, maybe that person will grow up to be homosexual, or maybe that person will have lots of other social or mental health issues, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want to be a different gender.
Let me just bring in something. Writing in the Mail on Sunday today, under the headline, "The Transgender Zealots Are Destroying Truth Itself," columnist Peter Hitchens had this to say on the issue. The idea that people are whatever sex they think they are is a terrifying weapon. A whole moral and social system is being destroyed. Okay, what do you make of that?
My issue and concern with just the rhetoric and the language being used is this has existed. You know, these lifestyles and people choosing to dress in a certain way or choosing their gender identity has existed since before. You know, there's probably not even, it's historical records of many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago. And so it's not some new thing that society has just made up suddenly. I feel like we're trying to diminish the value of people's right to exist.
Can I come in there?
You can come in, but I don't necessarily agree, but we could go in.
No, sorry, do you mind if I interject?
Go for it, go for it.
Okay, I fully accept that. Okay, I fully accept that. I mean, I've read a story of an ancient Roman soldier who liked to dress up in women's clothes. And he was still in the army, and he seemed to be accepted by his legion, okay? Just to give a historical antecedent to what you're saying. But what I think is, if you say that gender is biological and gender is not a social construct, then automatically, I think that makes you transphobic by certain elements of society. Germaine Greer is a good example. Okay? Of a feminist who came out and said, I don't care how many operations you've had, if you're born a man, you're a man. You don't know what it's like to go through a menstrual cycle. There are certain elements, there are certain things that you cannot experience, that a woman has experienced. So therefore, you cannot call yourself a woman.
But would she be defined as, why would she be defined as transphobic for simply speaking in biological terms? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by being
because the trans agenda says that if you want to say, I'm a woman, everybody has to accept you as a woman. You have to call that person a woman. You have to refer to her as a she. And because Germaine Greer, for an example, refused to say that, then automatically she was labelled transphobic, and she was no platform at many universities up and down the UK. And that just seems to be a certain element of exactly what Peter Hitchens is referring to, where people are being silenced for expressing a view. And there's a lot of scientific evidence that says that people are born into a specific gender.
Of course, well, yes, of course. We're talking biology here, but I'm just talking about the rhetoric of the statement that I've just heard. And I've got to be careful and conscious of the fact that there are people who are living in pain, high rates of suicide, from people who are not allowed to express themselves and so from my perspective, I just feel like this whole scaremongering of, oh, society suddenly is and it's going to cause this whole big thing of suddenly all the kids in the world are going to change and there's not going to be any gender. No, because we know from, I'm sure as you, as a historian, a history teacher, you will know that this is not new. Transgender identity is not new. So all of this talk about, it's fear-mongering. It actually makes people feel small. So what my fear is, this issue of, making children feel scared to just speak. What I want, I'd hate for children to feel like they can't even talk to their parents or someone close to them about the fact they might have some confusion when it comes to things like gender identity. And rather than just keep it hidden and go into some serious mental health issues, speak and be and explore. I'm not saying necessarily go as far as changing genders or going through surgery, but at least discuss it.
But that is becoming prevalent in a lot of medical clinics. There's a good example of a doctor in Canada, Dr. Kenneth Zucker, and he was dismissed from his post from the Child and Adolescent Mental Health and Safety Clinic in Toronto. And what he was doing is he was encouraging children to be comfortable in their own gender identity. So if you're born a boy and you're very girlish, be comfortable being a boy who's very girlish. Or vice versa, if you're born a girl who's very tomboy, then be comfortable in that identity and start to explore who you are. He got dismissed from his post. This is a man who has studied gender identity since the 1970s. And he got dismissed from his post because there's a large practice emerging in the medical profession now where it's called gender affirmative. So if you show that you, even at 2 years of age, and you say you want to be a girl when you're a boy, then automatically the parent has to pursue a course of hormone-blocking treatment.
That doesn't sound healthy anyway.
This is a fascinating discussion. But I'm afraid we are heading for a very short break. You're watching London Live Debate, and still to come.
You're not fit to run our school. Shame, shame, shame on you. You're not fit to run our school. Shame, shame, shame on you.
Discipline or discrimination. The London school standing firm on a uniform policy banning dreadlocks. That's coming up after the ads. Welcome back to London Live Debate. I'm Reya El-Salahi, and joining me on tonight's panel, the secondary school teacher Mark Foley, the businesswoman Ronke Lawal, and rounding up the trio, she's managed to make her way through the London traffic and join us, the cultural commentator Heather Robinson. Welcome to the panel, Heather. Now, tonight's topic is sparked by a Church of England report released this week calling for boys and girls to be allowed to wear whatever they want in the classroom. The new guidance says children should be able to try out the many cloaks of identity without being labelled or bullied because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, this comes just weeks after a London secondary school's been accused of racial and religious discrimination after a pupil was ordered to cut off his dreadlocks. A 12-year-old was told his hairstyle breached Fulham Boys School's uniform and appearance policy. Now, he since moved to a new school in order to keep his hairstyle, but speaking to London Live at the time, head teacher Alan Ebenezer defended the rule.
I believe what young men need is firm boundaries and strict discipline. If boys are going to, if that's going to work, then if they don't meet those high standards and firm boundaries, then you have to have punishments. You do, of course you do. So I think that this strict discipline policy, firm boundaries, actually makes boys happy and safe.
Alan Ebenezer, the head of Fulham Boys School there. So is he right? Should schools enforce strict policies around uniform and appearance, or is there a thin line between discipline and discrimination? Mark, you're a teacher. What do you think on this?
To be honest, I don't know very much about Rastafarian as a religious belief. So I can't say if Rastafarians have to grow dreadlocks or if it's necessary for them to grow dreadlocks. But when the head teacher says there needs to be strict guidelines, there needs to be strict boundaries in a school, I completely 100% agree with them.
Heather, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for me, I find that having a uniform policy is obviously sensible. It stops, discrimination and bullying based on, kids can wear what they want, then one kid's going to have designer stuff. But I think uniform policies do have discriminatory elements. You have certain hairstyles that aren't allowed, even though that has clearly no impact on education. And I mean, historically, there's been a lot of sexism in uniform policy. Young women being sent home because their skirt's too short and being told that their presence in school is distracting boys or occasionally male teachers, which I just find a really uncomfortable narrative, and that disrupts people's education. And I think when you're disrupting people's education, when no one else has been bothered by it, then I think the school's policy is the problem, not the child involved.
Ronke, nodding your head there, what's the difference between this case, a child being told to cut off his dreadlocks, and the Church of England guidance?
But this is completely different. I feel like nothing was said about the young boy's academic achievements or capabilities. This is literally about his hair. And in Rastafarianism, dreadlocks are an important part of their religion and their spiritual and cultural beliefs. And I feel like it's really insensitive that wasn't respected. It didn't disturb or disrupt the classroom. I don't think it was any kind of, it wasn't a distraction. And it says a lot actually about cultural awareness and sensitivities, because what's the boundary here? What are we saying about other religions that have to wear certain things as indicators of their religion? So I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that this went so far and the young boy had to move, because it is very disruptive.
Ronke, you work with young people, you mentor young people getting into business, becoming entrepreneurs. There is a certain level of discipline when it comes to what you wear in the workplace that you have to teach children. Where does that line between discrimination and discipline lie?
But Reya, and this is the issue. The thing that I am particularly concerned with is we have an issue with lack of diversity and inclusion, particularly in the corporate sector in business, full stop. So if you're teaching young kids that they all have to look the same, especially when it comes to their hair, that says a lot about how to fit in. Whether if somebody has dreadlocks or an afro, straight hair, bald hair, it should not affect their performance or their capacity to achieve in the future. So I always encourage my mentees that they can be who they want to be as long as they maintain excellence in along every step of the way. And it's really important, if we want to see a society that's thriving as a diverse panel as we are today, this evening, we need to allow for differences and allow each other to celebrate each other's differences. So I feel like it should have been respected.
Mark, should the head teacher's word, should the school's word be final on this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the school's word has to be final. I mean, like I say, I don't really know too much about Rastafarian beliefs, so I don't want to comment too much on that either way. But, I mean, the head teacher, he did say before it that there's specific guidelines on the school's website as to what students can and can't wear. And if I could just return to your point briefly, when you say that you try and encourage people to express themselves how they see fit. It shouldn't matter if you're a skinhead or wear dreadlocks or have an afro.
I didn't say skinhead. I said bald. Big difference.
Absolutely, but it's still a hairstyle. I think you have to give specific, if that's going to affect their chances of getting a job, or if having maybe a tattoo crawling up your neck is going to affect your chances of getting a job in an investment bank, I think it's good advice to students to say you need to dress a little bit more conservatively. You need to show yourself a little bit more conservative.
Not, you're going to but I don't necessarily, sorry to interrupt, I'm not saying, oh, just go around walking with whatever, walk like you're dressed like a carnival person, for example, if you're going to the office environment. But what I am saying is we have to allow for cultural differences. I know there's a lot of black young women who are discriminated against in their workplaces for braids or for their afros, and they feel uncomfortable about being themselves because of their natural hair. There's issues there as well. And yet they can do amazing things in the fields of law, finance, medicine. None of that really, hair is a cultural and personal, for some people, aspect, but at the same time, it does not affect how you do your job or how you educate or your academic achievements. So
yeah,
I've got to be a little bit...
I agree.
I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, not to try and sort of turn this on you, but, as a teacher saying, actually, I don't know much about Rastafarianism, I think that's clearly probably where the head teacher's coming from. He's not thought about it, not thought about who could possibly be within the catchment area. Do I have to think about that? And instead they've thought, what do young boys look like? What should I expect from young men in my school? And just chosen unconsciously or consciously to just say, no, this is the kind of person I want. And that excludes a lot of people, especially when you're in London. You have to have an awareness of the diversity of people and of their beliefs and just of their appearance.
Yeah.
And I think it's really unfair to say to someone, you can't come to school for something that is as natural as, the hair that comes out of your head. That would be really horrible as well for that kid to be told that.
Yeah, I agree. I think even people from African origin, I mean, there was an interesting case in Glamour magazine last week, or was it Grazia?
Oh, the photoshopping of Lupita.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. So there was
Yes.
was it an African model?
She had an afro hairstyle, and
Afro
it was
hairstyle, airbrushed to
out.
muckler Western. Yeah. So I do think there is pressure on certain people in society to conform to a certain way. But with regards to the school, if it means getting rid of dreadlocks because they're worn just for a fashion reason, I think the school has to have that prerogative. But then I do agree, if they're wearing those for religious beliefs, I mean, you're not going to ask somebody who is Islamic to take off a scarf, or you're not going to ask somebody who's Christian to remove a cross. But if they're wearing something that, I mean, I think it has to be the school's prerogative to set the tone of the dress. Even in regards to what you're saying with the skirt, if they want girls to have skirts down to the knee, I think that has to be the school's prerogative. You might disagree with it from a cultural standpoint, but you have to, if you start allowing students to play around with the rules a little bit, then it makes it much more difficult for teachers in a classroom trying to establish a sense of behaviour, because the main reason students are in a classroom is to learn. Right? They can express themselves on Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. They're in a very, what should be a controlled environment for a very specific reason. Now, I'm not saying that we don't encourage them to pursue their own creativity, but that's not the main reason they're in the school in the first place.
But I also find that it's a bit, this is partly the problem with school. Not the problem with school,
I'm
but the
afraid
school
to say
environment.
we have run out of time, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. That is it from us. Thank you to panellists Mark, Ronke and Heather for joining us, and of course to you at home for watching. London Live Debate returns at 5:30 on Sunday the 17th of December. See you then.